Hello and welcome to UC Today. My name's David Dungay. Today we have a fantastic session. We're going to be talking about delivering fantastic digital workplace experience with Microsoft Teams. I am joined by Kevin Keiller and Tim Jalland. Welcome to the show, guys. How are you both?
I'm all good, thank
Yeah,
you.
we're doing good, David.
Fantastic. Well, let's do a few introductions to start off the session. I'll start with Kevin. Kevin, you help organizations understand how to leverage Microsoft technologies. I call you Mr. Microsoft Teams. You're part analyst, part consultant. Thank you so much for joining us. And Tim, Solutions Director of VOSS Solutions. You work closely with your customers to help them design, build, and run UC and collaboration solutions. Welcome, Tim, to the show. Let's get straight into this conversation. We're going to be talking extensively around Microsoft Teams today. Kevin, I want to come to you first and talk about why does it seem that ongoing management piece is getting talked about a lot less than migration. Everyone's talking about migration, but not so much on that management side. Why is that? What's going on?
Yeah, well, thank you, David. I do think that ongoing management is sometimes forgotten, or at least it's not, adequately planned for. Migration and moving to Teams telephony, like that's an event. So organizations, they spin up a project, they assemble a project team, and they exert more effort over a short period of time than usual. And then, ta-da, we've migrated to, Teams telephony. And then, of course, the project managers and the engineers, they pack up and then they move on to the next project, solving the next, technical challenge. However, the ongoing management, you're going to be using Teams telephony for a number of years. And so this sustained effort of ongoing management, even though it's not as intense, it's exerted over a longer period of time. And quite quickly, that total effort associated with that ongoing management, it really exceeds the short-term, more intense, migration project. So organizations, from an investment of effort and from a cost and resource basis, they really should be spending more time planning for the ongoing management phase, as well as, not just looking at kind of that migration event.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a destination, is it? It's an ongoing. Tim, let's go to you next. Obviously, VOSS, you make solutions to help organisations not only migrate but also manage, UC platforms. What Kevin just said there. Does that ring true with you as well?
It really does. We're obviously involved early on with the implementation and rollout of a new voice solution, such as Microsoft Teams Phone. There's a lot of executive focus and help, if you can call it that. But post rollout, their attention moves on and it's left to the organization to manage and get the best out of the solution. And that's where we can help with appropriate tools on topics such as running the service efficiently, automating those regular day-to-day changes, and keeping a track on usage, user experience and costs.
Great. So, well, from an effort perspective, then you both seem to agree, which is always nice. But let's go back to Kevin. But how exactly does focusing on this management aspect actually help companies deliver a better or exceptional digital experience?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, and that's the key question, right? So, I believe how you manage is the key. So, look, if you just move telephony from on-prem Avaya or on-prem Cisco or, an older UCAS solution to Teams, that in and of itself doesn't really deliver any real benefits. Of course, after you migrate and the project's done, you're going to celebrate, right? That's fine. But really, it's during this management phase where now you have to ensure that you get the ongoing adoption of the features, right? So you promised that Teams telephony was going to give you all these good things, but if nobody's using the features, or if you don't know if people are using the features, that's not going to drive the return on investment. Or if user satisfaction, because you're not being responsive to the changes that they're asking for, if user satisfaction plummets after maybe initial honeymoon period, you're also not going to get the actual return on investment. And a lot of organizations move to Teams telephony because of the integration with the whole Microsoft 365 suite. And so it's really after you've implemented it that now we're in an opportunity to reevaluate some of the business processes, use some of that Teams telephony integration to hopefully improve overall productivity. And of course, that's what organizations are looking for as they move to newer platforms like Teams telephony. Of course, as well, if you do the migration, but organizations are not static. So people, come, they go, they change roles. Larger organizations are typically acquiring other companies. And really, you need to be able to be responsive to all those changes so that your end users have the proper configuration and access to the Team's capabilities in whatever role they happen to be, in at the particular time. And so to do that, you really need to have the right people. You have to have the processes. And then you need to figure out for your organization, what are the supporting tools so you can provide that effective ongoing management that's going to give you the return on investment that you promised when you started the project.
Yeah. Tim, maybe you could talk to some of the specific use cases you see at VOSS in terms of that successful management of teams. Maybe you could also sort of weave in some of how VOSS's solutions are designed to kind of help those customers.
Sure. Let's start by describing what success might look like. It's a combination of getting the basics and the foundation right. And what I mean by that is it's the underlying services running without any issues across the cloud, any customer-owned equipment, and out to the users at their various locations, be that in the office, at home, or working somewhere remotely, and then service delivery. The increasing expectation is that this can be self-service from local regional administrators or departments with only complex changes really needing the attention of the central IT specialists. And then finally, user experience and adoption. And against this, there's regular changes and new feature updates, particularly if you think from the likes of Microsoft and on the Microsoft Teams cloud. And there's constraints that organizations are working with, obviously, so things like budgets and costs and skilled technical resources, particularly to consider. So what I'm going to do is I wanted to illustrate some of these points and show a bit of the VOSS toolset in action with perhaps the most common day-to-day management activity in an organization, that we hear a lot around, and that's around managing new users, new joiners, movers and leavers in the organization. So here goes. Let's see how this goes. If we can throw up the first slide, please, David. So without thinking about this, and using the native configuration portal on or PowerShell scripts on Microsoft Teams, as you can see here on the slide, you can see that a new user onboarding, there's various onboarding steps to configure and activate the new user for voice, within the organization. And it's complex, it's a multi-step, and it's an unwieldy process that you have to go through. So here's the steps on the slide here. You can see that, and several of them. And here's the related PowerShell script as an example. And there's more of this if you're going to do this in bulk. And what this does is it translates into quite a bit of time. Has to really be done centrally by skilled staff, running these scripts to run these ads. And it's going to build up quite a bit of cost, on an ongoing basis from a management perspective, particularly around this new joiners, movers and leavers process. So let's contrast this now with a VOSS workflow. I'm going to bring in and show you how the VOSS toolset can work here and show you this in action a little. VOSS workflow to manage these ads and the automation really to make the various steps and changes. If we can drop the next slide up, please. This is a VOSS workflow in action. What you can see here is that users can be easily selected from the Active Directory. and then assigned a certain service profile or persona, and an option to configure a few simple and selected features, such as the telephone and contact number as an example. And then the workflow is going to run, with an audit trail, and it's going to make those changes across the cloud and across the various systems. It really is as simple as that. And what's more, there's also an option to do this in bulk in the same intuitive way. So that streamlines the whole user onboarding and offboarding process. And the workflow itself, it can be triggered from just a normal service desk with a service desk agent. Could be a local administrator, in a region, in an office, in a department, or perhaps it could be triggered from a ServiceNow system if that's what the customer is using. If you want to embed this workflow into an existing new employee onboarding process.
So if we stick around this use case, for example, new onboarding, new user onboarding with a set of services, what's the angle on tracking if they're being used?
I'm going to throw up another slide here if we can, and that is around this important topic, tracking user adoption, usage and experience. So this is super important, just from a productivity and a return on investment perspective. You really want to make sure as you're rolling out these services and onboarding new employees that the services, Microsoft Teams Voice, is really being used effectively by these users, on the service. Here's the slide, and it shows you just that. You can see on here the various workflows. There's the main dashboard on here, really showing the workload by application. So you see in here, for example, chat, meeting and calling. And there's options in here to filter down on certain departments, locations or groups, such as recent new adds to the organization. You can also drill down into the details around a particular user, for example. So you've got a new user join the organization, you're doing a bit of follow-up. I'm showing that on the slide here with the pop-out graphs. You can check in with them, make sure they're not having any problems, check if their usage is good, if it's low or not, what particular parts of the collaboration service they're making use of. It's really essential, these analytics, to make sure that they're getting up to speed and using the service properly. And the information here can be summarized up and reported on dashboards and out in reports and distributed out into regular service review meetings that you might have around the organization. So hopefully this use case around managing joiners and leavers in the organization has helped illustrate the importance and the need for proper planning and proper tools for what we call the everyday management task on Microsoft Teams Voice.
So Tim, streamlining that day-to-day management for these new joiners and leavers, that really digitizes and improves that process. But maybe we can come back to managing costs for a moment. It's incredibly important in today's world. A lot of companies are struggling with costs at the moment, for obvious reasons. Aside from the automation side of things, how else can VOSS really help on that side? Great question. So getting the basics right, just the overall services running properly and correctly, and then digitizing the service delivery, with automation, and then following up and tracking usage and adoption, as we sort of discussed here, other topics. But it's always important to keep a track on costs and budgets, and it's a key discussion in organisations, particularly at the moment. So what we've not talked about is this topic around cost management audit, I suppose is a word for it, around licensing, allocating out telephone numbers and the services and the like, where they're deployed, keeping a track on these, and just making sure they're being utilised properly. All these come with a recurring operating cost, and that's why it's so important to keep an angle on this, just to keep that under control and within budget. Unfortunately, the regular joiners and leavers process adds a daily churn in here. You can think of this, people coming in and out, to what is an already difficult process of extracting and correlating data out from the different applications, from the different sources. And it makes it virtually impossible without suitable tools to really track exactly who has what, and what the associated costs are around that. So at VOSS, cost management is an important part of this use case, and the automation that we discussed earlier really helps. But if we take that a little bit further now, and this is an example from a recent customer project we've deployed, and to do that, we can just throw up the next slide.
What we've done here is we're linked into the joiners and the leavers process as we've discussed, but we're now also ingesting actual usage activity from users on the network, from the voice service via call records. So we've got analytics on historical trends, perhaps over the last 6 months. But we've also got live data coming in here, day on day, which is showing which users are active, what services they're using, what assets have been utilized or not. And then from that, we're bringing up dashboards and reporting and getting that back into the organization so they've got information and can make an informed choice. So back to the project, there was configuration out there that was built up over time on various systems, but never really reviewed or cleaned. So in this example, the pie chart here for telephone numbers, just to pick them out as an item, looked like this. You can see the numbers that are allocated and used by users, plus those that are truly free and not allocated, in the free pool. But there's some in here that are allocated but only partly used. So this might be users making a few calls a month. So the question here is, and that gets raised, is does that user really need that service and that number and the associated licensing? No, there is an alternative mechanism to provide that service or whatever to identify and streamline those costs. But the big standout, though, is this large bucket of numbers that were allocated but not used. So they're allocated onto devices and the like, but not attached to users or used over the period. And that's a cost there without any usage or benefit, really. On this particular project, this was 20,000 users in the organization, taking us back to the core assets, particularly around licensing. That this was driving a cost penalty of nearly $60,000 per month, every month on month, so there's quite some savings in there for the customer, just by getting inside with some analytics, understanding what's going on and sort of streamlining costs through that.
Wow. So these are real tangible benefits to customers that can get this right. Thanks, Tim, for that. That was really great. And clearly, organizations, they need to be thinking about this management aspect of Microsoft Teams as well, for the reasons you just mentioned there, Tim. Kevin, let's come back to you. Before we sort of wrap up today's conversation, have you got any final thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers today?
Yeah, like Teams and more broadly Microsoft 365, and the whole suite, it's very powerful. And I absolutely love helping organizations determine if Teams Voice is a good fit, and then, helping coach them and helping them migrate to Teams Voice if it's applicable for them. But really what I get excited about is providing a great measurable return on investment and a user experience where the users say, yes, I'm happy with this. So, that's really about leveraging the potential power and understanding what people are using and, over time helping them use more of the features, because most of us, even people that, deal with this on a day-to-day basis, have difficulty keeping up with all the features of Teams because Microsoft keeps adding new features. So as Tim said, the adoption piece isn't a one and done, it's an ongoing piece, because you want people to adopt the additional features so that they're getting that productivity. And, the analytics, like some of the analytics that Tim showed off, one of the benefits of Microsoft 365 is there's a lot of telemetry. And so, tools can pull that data out. And as Tim showed, you can present it and you can use those insights either for cost optimization or to improve user satisfaction. But it's sort of depressing because not a lot of organizations leverage that power. The automated tools and the analytics tools, they can improve the overall responsiveness and consistency and the auditability of the processes. And of course, that impacts security. Those automated tools are often the keys to definitely providing that user satisfaction and on that return on investment that gets me really excited.
And Tim, have you got any final thoughts for our audience today?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts on my side, David. Yeah, so we're obviously very focused on helping organisations get the very best out of Microsoft Teams, the implementation of Teams, and that's really around getting the foundation right. It's around automating and digitising that service delivery, so those regular day-to-day changes that the organisation goes through, on a daily basis. And then to provide analytics and insights into the usage and the adoption, but also that cost stream as well. So we're working with organisations to really help them out with tooling and around that front. But if I can leave you with perhaps one thought to take from here, and it's around automation, and that's really the underlying sort of bedrock that makes all of this possible. So I'll leave you with that thought. If you'd like to see more or have a particular use case to discuss, go to our website or drop us a note.
Thank you very much. Well, look, Tim, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me and sharing some of your insights around this management of Microsoft Teams.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. You've been watching me, David Dungay, on UC Today. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a like and a share on social media. Of course, if you want to find out more about VOSS and their solutions that can help you, don't forget you can check out the link below in the description. Thanks very much. See you next time.